Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans. Yes. Welcome back to another edition of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. I'm one half the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, Mashal St. Patrick Hewitt, and with me as ever is my partner in crime, Santoki Nagilendran. Santoki, how you doing?
Yeah, all good, Mash. You know, we're coming like the Avengers, you know, dropped a few solo episodes each during the week, and then now we're back. The gang is back. We're here to do a podcast together. And Mash, obviously it's CPL season. It's going underway. I think they played in Antigua, St. Kitts, maybe St. Lucia as well. So we're here to do an episode which I guess is related to CPL, but we're not focusing on specific games or franchises, are we?
No, not really. And I'm going to get this straight off the bat. I'm going to be completely transparent for everybody watching this episode. So far in CPL, I have watched a total of one game. And that was today. At the time of recording, Santoki, that was today. And it was a game between St. Kitts and Antigua and Barbuda, right? Outside of that, I've watched highlights of, I want to say at least half of the games, maybe slightly over half of the games. I watch highlights. And I also won't lie and say, since probably about the start of this week, I've reached that stage, which I reach with most T20 tournaments, where I start to just zone out of the tournament because it's already boring, it's going on too long, and the crap teams have already been identified, and you already kind of know who's getting to the final four, so everything just feels inconsequential. So that's me being transparent. But given that the game that I did watch today, my first proper game of the tournament this year, I text you, Santoki, because, and again, being transparent with the audience, we were going back and forth on text about, should we record an episode? And I said to you, actually, I've got something that's been meandering in my head for a while. And the game today between St. Kitts and St. Kitts and Antigua, confirmed it for me, Santoki. And what was meandering in my head was these teams in CPL, some of them, in fact, the majority of them, don't have an identity. Now, I want everyone to know that Santoki doesn't know what I'm going to say next, right? So before this episode was recorded, we were in the green room just trying to discuss what are we going to say here. And I said to Santoki, just let me talk and give me your honest opinion. Just vibe off whatever I say. So I want everyone to understand Santoki doesn't know in what direction I'm about to go here. So anyway, Santoki, with that, all of that kind of disclaimer given to the audience, let me explain to you why I've brought up this lack of identity issue. Now, the first thing I will say, Santoki, is every T20 tournament outside of probably IPL, probably Big Bash League, probably PSL, outside of those three, maybe the South African one will say they don't have it either, but outside of those three that I named, every T20 league has an identity issue because the player movement is so transient, it's hard to care about any one side because they're picking squads in a draft, then within 2 games, one man has flown out, then the next man flies out, then the next man flies in, then 2 people are replaced, then one man goes off for international duty. So that's T20 league cricket in general. But here's the difference with CPL. CPL is based on countries. It's based on nations. This isn't club cricket. This isn't, let me pick a random league. This isn't, let's pick South Africa. This isn't like, I don't even know what their teams are called. Pal versus Eastern Sunrisers or whatever they're called or whatever it might be. This is Trinidad versus Guyana. Barbados versus St. Kitts. And my point is this, Santoki. When it's nations involved and not clubs, there has to be, by default, an identity formed. Otherwise, how can you expect people to naturally form a connection with cheering on their nation? Okay? And The reason it kind of really hit home for me today in this St. Kitts versus Antigua game is because I was looking at the St. Kitts team, Santoki, and the St. Kitts team is just a ragtag of just random man. Like, there's only one St. Kittitian in the team, which is Mikhail Louis, and there's just a random set of man from across the Caribbean, across the world. Why would a St. Kittitian or Nevisian care about that team? Like, there's nothing to define it as this is integral to who St. Kitts are. Obviously, people are saying, "Mash, shut up and let Santoki talk." I'm about to get there. And the reason why I'm bringing it up, Santoki, is because for Guyana and Trinidad, it's completely the opposite. I looked at Guyana's team, their roster. 10 of Guyana's team is Guyanese. And when you throw in man like Imran Tahir, who's there every single year, you might as well say 11 of the team is Guyanese, right?
Yeah.
Trinidad has always had iconic Trinidadian players kind of like as their franchise figureheads. And because these are GOATs of the game, it's clearly a Trinidadian team. But a lot of the other teams, Santoki, can we really say that about them? Massive monologue to start. Off you go.
Yeah, well, I think that's an interesting point. And then it leads to the whole discussion. Obviously, in our first class season, franchise cricket, St. Kitts would be part of the Leeward Islands, for instance. And you get the Windward Islands because you don't have that concentration of talent. Obviously, St. Kitts is a very, very small population, even in the context of the Caribbean. So for the St. Kitts and Nevis Patriots, you've obviously got Mikhail Louis there, who's kind of like a figurehead at the moment in the side. But generally, how many players can you get from St. Kitts to fill up a franchise? So it's hard to build that connection. I agree. I think Guyana and Trinidad have probably had the strongest sort of relationship with their CPL franchises. And there's also wider issues. I mean, if you think about it, CPL came at the time, 2013, when Guyana had stopped playing Test cricket. We last played a Test in Guyana in 2010. We played a few T20s, but generally there was no impetus of cricket in Guyana, international cricket, or a chance to see international players. CPL came at the right time. And obviously with Guyana, when they first started as well, which is importantly, I remember they signed Sunil Narayan, Krishmar Santoki, Denish Ramdin. So they had a lot of international players. So that as well, that context of Guyana not having a close relationship with West Indies cricket because they weren't coming over much probably led to them kind of forming a closer relationship with the Guyana Amazon Warriors. And again, Trinidad, what were they? Trinidad, Red Steel, and then TKR. Yeah. They've always kept a core of Trinidadian players. And I guess it's also Mash. Those two nations, I think we'll probably come on to this. I don't know what your sort of running order was, but I guess the big difference is for Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana, cricket is such an overwhelming. I know Trinidad does play football to a decent level in the Caribbean, but cricket is such a overriding number one sport in both of those countries. So it's inevitable they will sort of have a close relationship with their franchise sides. Whereas if you compare it to a Jamaica, we've talked about it before, they've got athletics, football, competing with cricket and being more popular. So inevitably, people there are going to have less of a connection with, for instance, the Jamaica Tallawahs. So there's a whole load of reasons, but I do agree with your fundamental point. If you're from St. Kitts or something, other than the Mikhail Louis who's come this year, what generally is there? What's the relationship you have other than being able to see franchise cricket at your front door, basically? It's hard to kind of build that relationship. But compared to Guyana and Trinidad, you'll never be able to compete, essentially.
Okay, that's an interesting take on it. And what I will say, just bringing in Jamaica for a second, even Jamaica, when they cared about CPL, they still always had a Jamaican core. Like, there was always, until Rovman moved across, there was Rovman. When Chris Gale was playing, there was Chris Gale. There was a Fabian Allen. Brandon King went back to Jamaica. So even with Jamaica, you could always say that, well, they will. Andre Russell would have played for Tallawahs, right, for a significant amount of time. So even with Tallawahs, you could always say there is a Jamaican core in that side. So when Jamaicans went to watch the Tallawahs, when Tallawahs used to play in Jamaica, you knew that the main players were Jamaican players. The Guyanese know that the main players are Guyanese. The overseas players are just supplementary players to the Guyanese core. Trinidad know that their main players, even now, Narayan, Akil, Pollard, Bravo. Even throw in Terence Hines and them, man. They know that their main core, Jaden Seals, will always be a Trini core. And I just wonder, Santoki. Yes, obviously your point is valid. We can't expect St. Kitts' main core to be St. Kittians. We can't expect Antigua's main core to. Well, maybe you could argue for Antigua. You can't expect Antigua's main core to be Antigans. But even Barbados, look at Barbados. When you look at them, their only real Barbadian core is Jason Holder. And I mean, they've got Kadima Lane, they've got Shamar Brooks, but even Barbados, you're like, so where's the Bayesian link to Barbados? And not to kind of criticize Rajasthan, although I'm about to criticize Rajasthan, when Barbados changed their name to Barbados Royals, Barbados had just become a republic, and then you're changing the name to Barbados Royals. So it's not even about players for me. There's a huge identity crisis for me when it comes to CPL, and I look at it from a longevity perspective, and I'm thinking to myself, how long can you expect people in the Caribbean to wave their flags for these teams if the teams don't have a core of talent that they can at least say, you represent our nation, you represent our island? And to be fair to St. Lucia, Santoki, I think St. Lucia, because St. Lucia don't have a significant talent pool, but they've done it in a clever way. Sammy is the coach. Obviously, he might as well be king of St. Lucia. Akeem Geist is there. Johnson Charles has a stadium named after him. He's there. But what St. Lucia do, which I'm critical of with other teams who don't have the talent to call on nationally, St. Lucia at least retain similar players. In the same way how Imran Tahir will always come back to Guyana, Roston Chase is always at St. Lucia. David Visa is always at St. Lucia. So at least if you're St. Lucian, you're like, well, we have even our overseas players, they're usually the same overseas players. There's a core that we can say, you always represent St. Lucia. So it's not as simple for me as saying, fill it with national talent. But I am saying you've got to at least have some kind of clear, identifiable core that makes people say, this is why I support this team.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I agree. Obviously, I think you can't go the way of saying, all right, all Bayesian players should be playing for Barbados Royals, like, because then that would defeat the whole purpose of being a franchise tournament. And we've seen him previous years, like a Pollard, when he went to Barbados, initially they were cussing him out. But because he stayed there for a few seasons and showed a lot of passion, he essentially became like an honorary Bayesian player for that period because he showed consistency. And I think if I was to critique CPL, I mean, I don't know if it's specifically CPL's fault. It's just the way of the changing T20 landscape. Like you said, Mash, players aren't staying with the same franchise. So, for instance, like a Chris Green, for instance, he was at Guyana Amazon Warriors for a few years, but now he's gone to, I think, Jamaica. I don't know where he is this season. He's changed different franchises. He's just an example, and I don't know if that's just symbolic of the wider T20 landscape, where players have so many options now that the CPL is essentially not first choice for them, especially you've got the MLC just before it as well, which offers more money. So we're essentially seeing less of an overseas talent pool being available for CPL and sort of weakening the kind of stars you can attract. And then at the same time, the players who are available aren't staying with a specific franchise. They're just moving about. So, for instance, Guyana Amazon Warriors opened up with a New Zealander, Tim Robinson, last night. I think he's only there for like 1 or 2 games.
But for Santoki, that's the thing. So I saw that scorecard and I saw Robinson in the Guyana game. I was like, who the hell is this guy? But this is my problem. Who the hell are these random people? What's a Guyanese man or woman who cares about Amazon Warriors? They're looking at this Tim Robinson guy going, where's he come from? What's he got to do with anything?
But then isn't this just a wider indication? So when CPL first started in 2013, like in terms of the money offered and sort of the quality, it was probably the second best league after the IPL. It was up there. Whereas now, like I said, you got South Africa T20 League offering big money, good quality. You got the MLC offering big money, good quality. You've got the UAE leagues offering big money as well. So there's so many competing things. It's obviously going to dilute sort of the talent available for CPL, specifically the window it covers. And then the other big talking point, Mash, is when CPL started, you had Chris Gale, Pollard,
Mm-hmm.
Narine, Russell at the peak, as in dominating IPL, dominating T20 cricket, Darren Sammy, goats of the game. Whereas now, obviously, Pollard and that still play, but they're veterans. But we haven't been able to replace them in the region with the next generation of stars who are not only big in the region, but big on a global level. You could argue Poran has kind of reached that level now, but who else is there? Hetmeyer hasn't shown the consistency or enough to be a big star. You'd imagine he was meant to be the next one. But other than that, other than Poran, there's not anyone under 30 in the region who you can say, look, if I'm a fan in New Zealand or T20 cricket, I'm going to tune in to see this West Indian player because he's a goat of the thing. So I think that's also the problem that's sort of hindered. I don't know if it's hindered support for franchises, but it's definitely sort of weakened the quality we're seeing. Obviously, you've got a Jewel Andrew coming through. He might be someone who can push forward. But at the moment, in that 20 to 30 age bracket, we haven't seen the next golden generation come through. And I think West Indies cricket, and more specifically CPL, has always benefited, at least for the first 7-8 years of its existence, of being able to call upon GOAT generation of West Indies players to heighten the publicity and get people watching even from outside the region.
So, and I agree with you on that. And this is why I always say that Trinidad are going to be the first of the big teams to have a real crisis in 3 to 4 years. Because obviously they'll still have Puran, they'll have Akil, but Pollard surely will have retired by then. Bravo, obviously, this is his last year. Like, Narine is 35, 36, and maybe he's got 3 more years, etc. Like, part of that kind of identity crisis within CPL is trying to establish what comes next. What comes next when you can't build the Caribbean element of the tournament around a set of goats? And because the teams don't have, some of them, or not enough of them, I would say, because they don't have a clear, identifiable DNA in terms of Caribbean talent, some of those teams are just they're just there. Like I'm not saying, like, I want people to understand. I'm not saying, oh, and therefore CPL isn't any good. That's not that's not even my point. I'm just more saying, and I think this links to your point, Santoki. Once upon a time, CPL was number 2. Now, I think there is a talent pool crisis that they are either dealing with or going to have to deal with, which also seeps over into a lack of a lack of identity across the teams. So effectively, we could be in a situation, Santoki, where now that Guyana have finally won a tournament or won a CPL title, they're in danger of CPL basically only being it's a 6-team league where only 3 teams can really win it. Because St. Kitts, I know St. Kitts won it in 2021 or whatever, but that was an anomaly, right? Do you look at Antigua and look at St. Kitts and go, yeah, you can win CPL again? No, because it's just there's nothing there. There's nothing that they're building around.
Yeah, so if you even looking at the table, just as we're recording, obviously Antigua and St. Kitts, I think they've lost 4 games, 1-1. So essentially they're ruled out of qualifying for the playoffs. So that means the 4 remaining teams, Barbados, Guyana, Trinidad, St. Lucia, have essentially qualified for. They know they're in the playoffs already now because Antigua and St. Kitts are down bad. So that also takes out the jeopardy. Now, Mash, the one thing I will say, the counter argument is, we might get people in the comments. It'd be interested to hear people's debates. They could say we're looking at it from a distant perspective, not in the region.
I agree.
So
yeah.
Obviously we're open to that, but it'd be interesting to know perspective of fans in, Guyana, St. Lucia, Trinidad, the countries where you're playing CPL, because we have had people message us saying like they've noticed the crowds have not been too busy in St. Kitts and St. Lucia, for instance. But I'd be interested to know, within each island or nation in the Caribbean, what is the hype like for CPL compared to, previous years? It'd be interesting to get that perspective because, like I said, we're looking at it from one angle. There may be a different counter argument. I mean, if you're Guyanese, you might say no matter what squad they put out there, it's still a chance to go for a lime and go out in the evening. So people will still go. And so it'd be interesting to get the perspective of people within the Caribbean as to what CPL is like at the moment, the fanfare it's generating. Because from our perspective, as you said, Mash, it just looks like the crisis in talent at the moment is going to hinder it, and there's not really an immediate solution to fix that.
The only immediate solution to fix this, and if anybody from CPL is watching, here's how you fix CPL going forward. And they will never do this. But here's what they actually do. Here's what they should actually do. And I want you to take what I'm about to suggest seriously, Santoki.
Yeah.
They should scrap the current version of CPL and change it into a Caribbean T20. That's what they should actually do. They should scrap it completely and bring back the Caribbean T20. Make it a bigger tournament. And the reason why I'm saying that, Santoki, is yes, everyone would say, oh, Mash, but the talent pool would be diluted and you can't expect teams like Grenada to compete or whatever. But I tell you what, everybody would be amped for it. I tell you that right now. If it became purely national with a couple foreign men who can come into each team, like 3 or 4 foreign men. So let's say there's a Grenada, let's say there's an Antigua, let's say there's a St. Kitts, a St. Lucia, and obviously Jamaica, Barbados, etc., right? And you go back to that old style Stanford version of it.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm naive for saying it, Santoki, but there is a bigger selling point in that than what I'm currently seeing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, as you said, the Stanford or even the Banks Beer one that they did after the Stanford one, like that sort of setup where it's a big jeopardy. Every island, every nation plays. But then, Mash, you've got the issue. Obviously, I don't know from a financial perspective, but can you run a franchise tournament, a global one, without any overseas players? Is the question.
They're allowed overseas, but I'm just saying that. So let's say you're allowed a squad of 15. You're allowed 4 overseas, but the rest of the team, the 11 or 10, whatever it is, have to be from your nation. Because I guess what I'm getting at, Santoki, is why should an Antiguan venture all the way to Sir Viv's ground to watch a team that has 2 Antiguan men in it and a bunch of random people? Basically, watch the Tallawahs. That's what they're watching. So what is the pull for an Antiguan to go out to Sir Viv to watch this team when it is literally the Jamaica Tallawahs who have been flown out to Antigua, right? And the only reason you might go is because you're like, boy, we got Jewel Andrew and we got Kofi James, but is 2 man enough to make Antiguans want to flock to watch this side?
Yeah, obviously, if you're from Antigua as well, we'd love to hear your comments. So comment below on this video. What are you saying? Are you going out to the Saviv Stadium to watch CPL this year? Have you stayed back because you haven't seen enough local talent? It'd be interesting to get perspectives. And Mash, I think another point, I think your idea is a good one in terms of trying to reinvigorate the sort of how the composition of teams. I think another interesting point, Ash, is there was a period about 3-4 years ago when we assumed every franchise would just get bought out by an IPL franchise. Obviously, the Barbados Royals, Trinbago Knight Riders. I think, didn't the Punjab Kings buy, was it St. Lucia?
St. Lucia. St. Lucia, yeah.
But there doesn't seem to be, whilst it seems there was a surge of interest in those, firstly, the other franchises, so for instance, Guyana Amazon Warriors, were never bought out. And there doesn't seem to be much of, we've not heard from the IPL owners about any plans, any grand plans for the CPL or any sort of changes. So I'm wondering if the ship has sailed in terms of IPL owners seeing CPL as something to expand and make bigger. And now they focused on the South Africa one, which has popped up, and the 100 now going up for sale. So I'm wondering as well if that's sort of indicative of things, the fact that we haven't seen IPL franchises try to make big changes in CPL. Is that just a case of, you know what, there's other franchise leagues who have shown more opportunity for expansion?
Here's my theory. If what you're saying is true, and IPL ain't really pre-in CPL or studying CPL like they used to, here's why they wouldn't be. 1, they don't see it as a league that can grow any bigger. That would be issue number 1. So at the end of the day, everything's about money. Do they see economic growth, or do they see large economic growth as a possibility within CPL? That's question number 1. And then question number 2 is, maybe it's nothing to do with economics, and they're looking at it and going, there's not the talent. There's not the talent there for us to take advantage of and see like potential talent that we can get early and bring into the IPL system and so on and so forth. Like maybe it's a talent issue. Why should an IPL franchise, just for argument's sake, why would you buy St. Kitts and Nevis Patriots? What's the upside?
I mean,
I don't see it.
yeah, the thing is as well, like obviously we're not privy to the financial details. So for all we know, IPL franchises might be saying, if you're owning St. Lucia Kings, you might be saying, oh, okay, we're making money from this franchise. We don't need to do nothing. So that could be one thing. But I just think it's strange that we saw franchises, it was all around the same period as well, buy up 3 CPL franchises. And then we've not heard nothing, no communication about it, no sort of, even like Shimon Hetmeyer, we assumed he'd move from Guyana Amazon Warriors to Barbados Royals because of his Rajasthan Royals link. Stuff like that hasn't happened. So for me, it just seems strange. And then if you look at the South Africa League, like the Sunrisers and stuff, and all the franchises, Mumbai, whatever Mumbai owned, MI, I forgot what team they even own. Is it Johannesburg or something? It's very clear from their uniforms and sort of the consistency between South African franchise players and their home IPL franchises. The links there, it just feels like IPL is more closely linked with the South Africa T20 League than with CPL.
But also, Major League Cricket's here now.
Yeah.
And Major League, whether CPL like it or not, Major League Cricket's on our doorstep. And notice the IPL owners were quick to go there.
Yeah.
And even the Australian man, they were quick to go there. So the question has to be asked: how comes they're not quick to come CPL anymore?
Yeah.
And that's why I go back to the point about growth opportunity. If they thought there was genuine opportunities to economically grow, surely they'd be all over CPL. What I will just say as a disclaimer is I have heard rumors in the last 6 months to 8 months or so that Delhi Capitals were interested in buying out or bringing back, if the Jamaica franchise comes back. I'd heard some rumor from a reputable source that Delhi Capitals were looking at investing in a Jamaica. But to be fair, Santoki, that would make sense. And let me tell you why. Because Jamaica's the biggest nation in the Caribbean. So if you are going to invest, it would make sense that you'd target Jamaica because, well, look how big it is compared to everybody else. But I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like I said, we're not privy to the financial details. For all we know, IPL franchises are happy with the performance of CPL. It just seems like things are a bit stagnant. But Mash, a wider question is, obviously the IPL has been around for 16, 17 years, but it's a behemoth in and of itself. Essentially, it's always going to run. Do you just think CPL seeming to stagnate in terms of progression and expansion is just a sign that, you know, franchise leagues aren't expected, like it's hard to run a franchise league for that long a period because it's one of the longest franchise leagues at the moment, 11 years. Is it just a case of like in 10 years, are we going to be saying the same thing about the South Africa League, for instance? Because it's just not possible to expand something on an upward trajectory for so many years without it sort of just hitting a ceiling and then just staying at its level.
I agree with you, but the only way you get round that is if you have a constant production line of new and exciting talent. And that fundamentally is my point. This year in CPL, if I said to everybody watching this episode, without thinking, tell me the top 10 talents under the age of 25, which you've seen this year so far in the tournament, where you're like, yeah, the future is bright. And all anyone would say, Santoki, is Jewel Andrew, and then that would be the end of the conversation. So if you aren't producing regular talent to show that a league is growing, I guess, if that's the right word to use, you're going to hit a snag in the train tracks, so to speak. Like, you're going to reach a natural point where things look like they're plateauing, and the only way around it is either someone buys or invests further into the tournament, or you find some talent, or you rebrand. And that's why I go back to my idea about a wider Caribbean tournament.
Yeah, so I agree. Yeah, it'd be interesting, like, how much of an onus does CPL take? Because obviously it's in their interest to have that production line of young players coming through. So how is that going to be? Is it just solely reliant on Cricket West Indies at the moment to develop that talent and then they showcase it in CPL? Are we going to see more of a joint venture, CPL and Cricket West Indies, to kind of develop young players on in a more systematic way rather than putting one or two emerging players into each franchise. So it'd be interesting to see that because, like you said, CPL only functions if there's young, exciting players who people tune in to want to watch. And as you said, the likes of Pollard, the Bravo, they're going or gone already. So where's that next generation? And it's big questions to ask. And obviously, this isn't a cuss out of CPL. We're not saying, oh, it's a terrible tournament. We're just kind of giving our opinions on sort of the changes we've sort of noticed in recent years with the tournament.
Yeah, no, listen, a tournament is only as good as the talent on show. And if you don't give people a reason to keep coming back, and if people start to realize that, I think I said it on the Cricket 8 podcast earlier this week, Imran Tahir is still one of the main players in CPL at 45 years old. That says everything. Yeah. That's that. I don't need to go any further than to say that.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, obviously as a Guyanese supporter, the Imran Tahir thing is mad to me because he's 45 years old. So I get, like, obviously he's put in the work for Guyana Amazon Warriors. I think he's been there for like 7-8 years or whatever. And obviously last year he was crying when they won the trophy. It obviously meant something to him. But at the same time, when you've got Guyana, which develops so many spinners like across the country, you're telling me 45-year-old Imran Tahir is not only just in the side, but captain in the side and the main figurehead for the side, when we could be putting a young Guyanese spinner into that side to play alongside Moti and be like, listen, you can learn here. Here's what we're doing. And at least it will be a connection for fans, because obviously if it's a man from Demerara or Berbice, people will know of him already, like that player, and it links that connection. So with Imran Tahir, it feels like they're not going to stop picking him until he decides to call it quits, rather than saying, listen, like, you're too old. So that for me is a sticking point, because I do disagree with it when it gets to a point where you've got a 45-year-old. And also, what is it saying?
45, you know,
45 is mad. Like, what is it saying for what is it saying for the credibility of the league? Not just CPL, any franchise league, when you've got a 45-year-old captain in the side. Like, it's mad to me. So those are things which I like to see change. Just less emphasis on those. Well, it's unprecedented. Has there ever been a sort of 45-year-old captain in any major franchise league? I can't think of any.
Bro,
so
everybody who's Imran Tahir's age has retired and is playing Legends League cricket. These times, Imran Tahir is playing front line, captaining in what's supposed to be one of the premier tournaments in the world. Come on, man. Like I say, people will vote. People will vote with their feet. Simple.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, obviously, like I said, I think regardless, and it links back to your whole thing about different identities or nations. I think regardless of whoever's playing, when the legs come to Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana, we'll see packed out stadiums.
Yeah, 1000%. Yeah.
Like, we're not even debating that. It's just because they forged more of an identity with the franchise. And obviously with Guyana having won it last year, fans will be excited to see them defend the title. They're already champions. So we're not expecting much of a change there.
Listen, I'm fairly certain that there will be people from across the region who will say that you two stink London Englishmen don't know what you're talking about. Whatever. Listen, get in the comments below, because Santoki made a very good point there. We're looking at this from people who are watching this either highlights on YouTube or watching it on when the games are happening on TV. For all we know, in Saint Kitts, in Antigua, in Saint Lucia and Barbados, everyone is completely and utterly amped for the tournament. The reason I've not included Trinidad and Guyana in that is because we done know already how it goes in Trinidad and Guyana. But I guess this would be the last thing I would say, Santoki. CPL has lost Jamaica. Jamaica don't care, don't want to be in the competition. If they ever lost Trinidad and Guyana, the tournament would have no legs to stand on whatsoever. Because I guess that's my point. Trinidad and Guyana currently make up about 70% of the vibes of CPL. If we're gonna be real, there's a reason why the tournament ends in Guyana. There's a reason why it goes Trinidad then Guyana to end the tournament, because that's the vibes.
Yeah.
But them same vibes have to be replicated across the Caribbean. Otherwise, what is this that we're actually seeing? The game I saw today between St. Kitts and St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Antigua, felt like I was watching the equivalent of like a League Two football match in England. It didn't feel like I was watching the equivalent of Premier League cricket, if you see what I mean. So we can all stick our heads in the sand and say, oh, but Mash, but we can see what we can see.
Yeah, and I think it's a massive blow because Jamaica Tallawahs were one of the inaugural sides in CPL. So by losing them, and obviously we've already done an episode on Jamaica not choosing to have a franchise in CPL or the conditions behind that. But I think by losing an inaugural side, you lose all the rivalry that goes from it and everything and the history as well. If you're a big part of franchise tournaments like IPL, the reason why it's so big is because each franchise currently has their own history. And for a lot of them, for the most of them, it goes back 17 years. Whereas Jamaica Tallawahs, that's all been cut. And I don't think adding, obviously, Antigua Falcons coming in is good for Antigua. And I'm sure there'll be Antiguan fans cussing us up saying, listen, we're representing our franchise. But for the sake of the tournament, I would have liked to have seen Antigua added in and already have a Jamaica, just to add to that legacy factor. By losing Jamaica Tallawahs, an established franchise, you're losing part of the sell of the tournament.
100%. Listen, people, we're going to wrap it there. A bit of a longer one, but it's the first one that we've done together in a while. Get in the comments below. I'm fairly certain some people have enough to say about this. You always seem to when we give our opinions on stuff. But on your way out, like the video, share the video, subscribe, become a patron. Head to www. I don't even know what it is myself. One second. www.patreon.com/Carib Cricket. So if you'd like to financially support the movement and reward us for the work that we do, we are number one, no matter what people say. We've got plenty of imitators, but nobody does the show quite like we do. So like, share, subscribe, follow Caribbean Cricket Podcast. Just type it into Google. You'll find all of our different handles, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, etc. And we will be back very, very soon with another episode. See you there.
We rule the cricket world. Now the rule seems coming.
Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans.